Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Hello,
Hi.
so many faces.
So many friends, new friends, future friends, friends from the past, people that we are going to love in the future. That's great. Almost 70 people connected. That's always
Uh-huh.
great. This is Agora webinars. We are meeting together every 2 or 3 months just to get together, say hello, and know the best artists on the world. Today we have the big pleasure of having Heather and Edern and Susan Bernstein with us for the presentation of their projects. I think it's going to be an amazing experience. Um, I'm going to start now just to use as much as possible the time for giving the time to the girls today to present. Um, I'm Pablo, as some of you might know, the co-director of Experimental Photo Festival and Agora School of Experimentation. I have on my right Laura.
Yes, I was just reading all the messages about all the countries where the people is coming from, and my my head is blowing. Wow. Welcome, everyone. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Laura. Hi, Pedro. Welcome.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Also, Pedro from our team. They are going to be helping with all the backstage of this amazing conversation. You can use the chat for putting all the questions. Also, the questions for the artists. All of them are going to go there. As you know, we are a lot of people. We need to control a little bit the conversation. Just put the comments there, and Laura will organize them in a document. And in the end, we will do the presentation. I mean, we will start with their presentation and then do the questions in the end. But don't wait for the questions till the end. Just be sure to put the questions in the chat, and we will talk about this in the end, depending on the time that we have. This webinar is part of the presentation of the last round of the diploma of Agora. As you know, Agora School of Experimentation has presented the first diploma in experimental, creative, alternative photography. Is a 1 year program, pretty interesting because it's organized with all the content that we have created over the last 6 years, with the contents from the festival, and also all the things that we have done outside on the Agora. Feel free to join to the diploma if you are interested, because we are starting on September the 9th. This is in 2 weeks, exactly on Wednesday. And it's the last round that we are going to have, the last possibility for you to join in till October, because we are closing our school to focus on the festival. That you also know that the Experimental Photo Festival is happening in Barcelona in July every year. We are now more than 120 people registered. It's going to be a great opportunity if you want to learn hand by hand with the artists. Is great. I mean, we are the biggest festival on workshops. We have this year 69 live workshops that you can do in Barcelona in 5 days. Just feel free to check our webpage and registrations. Some of them are sold out now because people is buying tickets and using to choose the best ones. But as you know, we have 69. We have at least 60 more with free spots for you to get in. And also just stay till the end of today's conversation if you can, obviously, because we are going to have amazing news in the end, because we have just arrived to 30,000 subscribers to our newsletter, and we want to celebrate this with you. Just stay till the end. That is kind of the advertising part of the thing, just waiting for people to arrive. We are 81 people. That's great. Okay, about today, we are going to have a lot of fun. We have three amazing women in the English one, and then we stay for a Spanish conversation also with three other amazing artists. We are, as you know, in the month of Women March. We don't want to do, normally we are not on the trends, but we do want to do something. And this was our opportunity to do it outside of the beginning of March, that normally is full of things. We are just calmly making this conversation today to celebrate these amazing months with six women that we truly believe that are really amazing and that they have a strong personality, something that you can really see if you see an image that they are the authors. And this is the questions that our students are always asking. How can I arrive, or how can I find my own voice? This is kind of the subject of today. And that is also the invitation that we did to the artists to tell a little bit to our audiences how you have arrived, or what is your last project or your projects, and how they can really also find a way of doing their own projects like yours. And then this idea came from research that we did in our social networks about what were our students wanted, what they want to see. And they say, we want to see more projects, we want to see more artists. And that's why we organized this activity. That's it. Questions in the end, put them in the chat. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to introduce you, Heather. Then you can say other things if you want, but just to have a brief presentation. And it's your time. You are a New Jersey photography artist and educator, specialized in alternative and historical photography processes. You have studied photography and fine art education at Montclair State University, focusing on large format photography. I took all this information from your webpage. If something is not correct, it's not.
No, it's perfect.
It's good? Okay.
Yeah.
You are passionate about experimental technique as pinhole, cyanotype, lumen prints, and chemigrams. You explore the intersection of historical and the natural world using sunlight, water, and time. Climate change, invasive species, I think today is going to go through there, human-nature connection, and the importance of ecological awareness. And you teach photography, leads the New Jersey Pinhole Club, and has published at least 2 books, hope more, that I have both them here.
Oh, yay! Thanks, Pablo.
And we invite you, this is advertising from Yosa, and we invite you, if you are interested to know more, Intro, Solarigraphy, and Don't Fix It Yet. Welcome, Heather. Thank you so much for being part of this class today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am truly honored, and that was a lovely introduction. Let me share my screen. All right. And you guys are seeing my slideshow?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, good. I always get a little nervous when starting to share. So yes, I am going to be speaking about my invasive species projects today. And I feel like I can just skip this slide altogether because I was just introduced so well. I am currently sitting in my high school photography classroom. So I'm glad that this worked with my schedule. And once again, thank you so much for having me today. My work typically, though, is not always about invasive species. For those of you, and I did see a ton of familiar faces, which I love, but there are also some new friends in the chat here. So if you are unfamiliar with my work, you can see here, this is a variety of projects I've worked on over the years. I think I'm most well known for my pinhole photography, but I also work in a variety of cameraless processes like lumen printing and cyanotype. I do a lot of photograms, which I don't have here, and I even sometimes work with a digital camera. My projects have always been about Mother Nature, or more specifically about humans' connection to Mother Nature. Sometimes that's really positive, like my own personal spiritual connection. I very often try to find ways to physically collaborate with Mother Nature in my artwork. And other times my work is about climate change and advocacy, which is what I'll be speaking about today. So I'm going to talk about two different projects, one of which is a past project that is currently on exhibit at the Vermont Center of Photography in Vermont in the United States, and one that I have never shown before at all that I just started last summer and is very much so a work in progress, but I feel very comfortable with the experimental photo festival community that Pablo and Laura have created. So I feel vulnerable and comfortable to share this work in progress with you all today. And then, of course, at the end, I'll talk about how I come up with concepts and ideas. And, since I'm sitting in my high school photo classroom, a couple tips and tricks for you that I teach my students when they're learning how to do this as well. So my first invasive species project was about the spotted lanternflies. They are a gorgeous, as you can see, incredibly beautiful insect that migrated from Asia to Pennsylvania in the United States in 2014. I live in New Jersey, the state right next door. It took them 6 years to make their way to New Jersey, but in the year 2020, was when I was introduced to them personally. They are an insect that has no known predators, and they completely invaded our forests, which I spend a lot of time hiking in. They envelop trees, they suck the sap out of the trees, which will eventually kill them, and then they urinate that sap onto the ground. It's sugary, and that sugary sap gets a black sooty mold on it, which then kills the forest floor. And as you're walking or hiking through the forest, it looks as if the forest was burned because it's just black, full of molds with insects covering all of the trees. We were told in New Jersey by our government and by environmental organizations that humans need to get out there and kill all of these bugs as soon as you see them. And there was like a stump it out campaign in the year 2021, especially a year after they came to New Jersey. This was a cultural phenomenon. People had bar crawls. They were walking around in the streets, stepping on these bugs. Everyone was making artwork about them. And I wanted to make like kind of a satirical artwork about what it means to squash the bugs. Now, for many of us in this group chat, I'm sure that you have made cameraless work before where you're creating like lumen prints or something and squashing photo paper under glass. And I thought that it would be funny. Oh no, my video is not going to share. Okay, I'm sorry, but this is a video of me taking a glass easel, physically taking a bug, putting it on photo paper and squishing it under glass. Its guts would come out and I would make the lumen print of it. And eventually, after doing this quite a few times, it was gross, but I thought it was funny and relevant of the times. I eventually started painting the bottoms of shoes with photochemistry and stomping on the bug on the photochemistry and creating lumen prints. I made hundreds of these. I don't have hundreds of pairs of shoes, so I got the help of friends, family members, community members, and students to help me make these. And this is currently what's on exhibit in Vermont, showing how a community can come together to help fight an invasive species. But through a critique that I did actually with Pablo when the Agora school first opened, I'm very thankful to him because he gave really good critique that day and told me that although this is beautiful, he's not really understanding what this bug is and why we're killing it. And like, I needed to push myself further. So thankfully to him, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Here are some more photos of the squished bugs. Here we go, Pablo. I was able to push this project a little bit further, and through experimenting in the darkroom with a combination of enlargements, photograms, and chemigrams, I aimed to show what it actually felt like to be hiking in those forests. So I made a variety of works, and then I framed them in wood that had been affected by invasive bugs, boring beetles, and the ambrosia fungus, and things like that. So these are what those final presentations looked like. And here are just more details of those works is a combination of photogram and pinhole photography, lumen printing and photograms, enlargements and photograms, and multiple enlargements, photogram and chemigram, all mixed together. This project is complete. I finished it in 2022, and I have been continuing to exhibit it, and I plan to continue to do that in states that have either just gotten their first infestation or are like one of the next states to get it, a state that's nearby, a state that's currently infested, to educate citizens on what to do when they see these bugs, and just to continue some of my advocacy work. So that's one project, and that is a complete one. And then last summer, I started working on a new project that I'll share with you. And this is about a different invasive bug called the hemlock woolly adelgid. Now, hemlock, anytime I've talked about the hemlocks, mostly to Europeans, I find they are immediately like, oh, don't touch that, it'll kill you. But I'm not speaking of the deadly hemlock plant, rather the very beautiful eastern hemlock tree. And there is an insect, as you can see here, that is killing the hemlock trees, just like we have insects that are currently killing our ash trees, and we have beech bark disease. I feel like all of the trees that I have grown to know and love throughout my life are under attack, and the hemlock woolly adelgid has special meaning to me, because I am very fortunate that I am a steward of land that I purchased 10 years ago in upstate New York. I have an off-the-grid little cabin in a deciduous forest that is mostly made up of hemlocks. When you come onto this forest, I've never met a person that doesn't just immediately get a sense of ease. The environment is, I could almost cry just like talking about. I can't even explain to you how sacred this forest is. You can see here that as if I'm laying on a beach, I'll lay out a towel and just lay in the forest. The forest is made up mostly of hemlocks. There's, of course, birch and beech and maple and oak and walnut and all of the other friends, but mostly hemlocks. And a hemlock forest, if you've never been in one, it is deeply shaded, which prevents there from being a lot of understory. They're very easy to walk through. The trees are spread out. It's moist. The ground is soft. The shade protects you from the heat in the summer. The canopy is essential to the ecosystem, providing shelter to deer and other mammals, especially in the winter months when it's snowing. The hemlock is an evergreen, so it protects the forest floor. And they're also very often found by forested streams, which keeps the water cold, which is essential for many fish that live in those environments. So I'm having a little bit of anticipatory grief about the hemlock woolly adelgid. This forest where my cabin is, that I spend a great deal of time in, does not have the hemlock woolly adelgid, but it is an established insect within the Adirondack region, and it is a half hour's drive from where my cabin is. So it is within the same forest system that I live in. And I am anticipating that the hemlock woolly adelgid will invade my forest sooner than later. Anticipatory grief, I just grabbed a definition off the internet, is when you have the feeling of grief while a person is still alive. You worry about the future and how you will cope without them. It's typically when referring to when someone that you know is about to die, and you're like anticipating that grief ahead of time before they have passed. So I'm experiencing that with my forest. And instead of going to my forest and being like, I feel calm, I'm happy here. Now, ever since I learned about the HWA insect, I'm going through the forest staring, looking, questioning, does it have it now? When will it have it? Is this the last time I'll be in my forest without this bug? How long until I lose the forest altogether? As if you had a terminally ill grandparent, let's say. I'm thinking about how can I document this tree while it's still here. And I'm doing that with FP100C, the pull apart instant film. I'm doing this in kind of a documentarian sort of a style. I would like to do it in all seasons, and I want the photos to look unhurried, like as if I spend a lot of time there, which I do. And so here are some of those images that I've been taking. Like I said, I started this project last year. So this is very much a work in progress. These are some of the best ones that I've got. The film itself is over 10 years expired, which comes with it a little bit of trial and error. Not all of the images and rolls are still great. Some interesting color shifts, but I'm shooting it on my Mamiya RB67. And the connection that I have and why I'm shooting it with this specific film is that they don't make this film anymore. And although I currently have a lot of it, like a bunch of it, I know that there will be a day where I'll never be able to shoot this film again. So my options are hoard it and never shoot it, in which case it's just going to end up in the garbage. Like it'll go bad eventually. So I have to shoot it. But now that I'm using this film, I'm using it. I'm going to run out of it one day. It will no longer be here. And I find a deep connection between how I feel about the film and how I feel about the forest, which is why I'm choosing to do this project on this film. So here are some more of these images. Like I said, I'm not finished with this project yet. I kind of envision collaging some of these images into photo albums, scrapbook style pages, as if I was creating images of family members that I didn't want to forget after they passed. So I'll kind of see where this project takes me. Before I start doing any of the presentation aspect of it, I'd certainly want to continue the image making aspect of it. So I'll be pursuing this for a while, I suppose. We'll see, I guess, until I run out of film. And then in my research of the hemlock woolly adelgid, of course, I'd like to learn about this insect and my forest. I discovered something interesting, that it's natural, the phenols in the tree, its natural defense against an invasion is actually the same ingredient that you need to make Eco Developer. And that was like a light bulb moment went off in my head. So I wanted to make Eco Developer out of the hemlock needles. And I chose to create chemigrams with the Eco Developer that I was making. This is a video of me pursuing this project. It is very meditative, very intuitive, getting myself into a headspace to really connect with the energy of the forest and the space and create these intuitive gesture drawings with the hemlock, with the developer. And you can see my workspace, which looks like a hot mess in this photo, is actually in the hemlock forest underneath the dappled sunlight of the hemlock trees. So this is the space that I'm working in, and some of the works that I've created. You can see that as I channel some of that energy of the trees, of the forest, of this space. Sometimes they're loud, sometimes they're soft. The images are 11 by 14 in size. And yeah, this has been really an interesting and really fun way to connect with the trees. I really enjoyed creating these last summer. Here's just a detail shot. I was incorporating lumen prints into them, and then they ended up a little phytogrammy because of the developer. So there's that. And then just for anyone who's curious, I would love to share my recipe. I can't say that I concocted this out of nowhere. I certainly have purchased from the Sustainable Darkroom in the UK their books on eco-developing. So through reading those books and through doing research online, this is what I have used. I have only ever used it for chemigrams, so I cannot tell you how much time you will need to develop if you were to develop film or paper with this. But if you'd like to take a screenshot, I also have some information about how to ethically forage for different plant materials. So I'm happy to share this with you. And then just to talk, I know I'm running out of time, just to talk a little bit about how to come up with ideas, how to make projects, and kind of what I do. I have something I screenshotted that I saw on Instagram last summer, and I feel like it really resonates. Inspiration is not going to come to a person that just sits around and does nothing. Inspiration is not going to strike you when you are laying on your couch. I'm sorry to tell you, it doesn't come from nowhere. And I feel like this quote that, like I said, I just found it on Instagram and screenshotted it. It says, before an artist can make good art, they must go out and experience life. And I feel like if I can recommend anything to you, to be an artist, is just to go out and immerse yourself in culture, immerse yourself in experiences, even especially things that would not be natural to you. Go and be curious about the world around you. Do something new, do something scary. Just go out and experience. And I can promise you that eventually you will have inspiration. You will find motivation. I know for me personally, it ebbs and flows. There are some years where I am just overflowing with inspiration and ideas. I can't keep up with it. And then I might have a year where I'm not really making anything. And I really shame myself about that, but I know it's part of the natural process. So just all you can do is just go out and connect with the world around you, and eventually something will strike. But when something strikes, you have to use it. You will lose your motivation and it will become less relevant to you over time. So when you feel that strike, like, go out and do something with it. For me, as a high school photography teacher, so I'm teaching teenagers, and for some of them, coming up with concepts and turning them into ideas, just like many of us, for some of us, this is very natural. And for others, we struggle. So at the beginning of the year, when we make our sketchbooks, and maybe you could do the same, I know that I do this as well, we make lists. Tons and tons of lists that we can reflect back on. What are you passionate about? What like fires you up? What are you angry about? Politically, especially, I feel like. What techniques and processes do you like? Describe yourself and why. Like, what is your favorite music and why? Just make a ton of lists. And then when you get struck by inspiration, then you can start going through those lists and find connections within themselves and to the inspiration that has hit you. The goal for me, at least, and what I teach my students, is to create a project that synthesizes an idea with a material and a process. So for me, I think that finding something I'm passionate about is certainly the first step. Now, if you don't have anything you're feeling passionate about, don't just sit around and do nothing. I highly recommend just like make art, just make, and maybe something will happen for you just from the making until you get that strike. But if you end up with a strike of inspiration ahead of time, it doesn't matter if anyone else relates to it, like the hemlock woolly adelgid. Maybe no one else in this chat cares about this bug at all, but that doesn't matter. It's relevant to me and I'm feeling inspired. So I'm feeling passionate about that right now. I'm going to go and make artwork about that. And then use a process or a material that you enjoy. I believe that there is not an artist on the face of the planet forcing themselves to use a medium they don't like. Why would we do that? That is a chore. So for me, I love historical processes. I love analog photography. That's where I'm going to go to. And you can see how I used the FP100C film with the hemlock woolly adelgid project and why. With the spotted lanternflies, I chose to use warm tone paper because of the red hue that I was getting out of the lumen prints, and that related to the red, beautiful color that's so eye-catching of the bug. So finding a process and material that you like, but also relates. And then I find as a pinhole photographer, it's so easy to see how personality affects approach with that medium specifically, because with pinhole, you can pursue the medium so mathematically and precisely and perfectly, or you can be just as successful by pursuing it in an intuitive way where you don't care about the math and the perfection. So I learned that a lot as a pinhole photographer, and it applies to all artwork. Your personality will be imbued into your work. Please don't try to copy someone else's personality and approach into your work. Your work will feel like yours when you're putting yourself into it. I feel like sometimes, we all run into the trap of comparing ourselves. And I feel like my work is simple and direct and not as conceptual as someone else's work. And maybe I feel badly about myself for that, but that's just my personality. I'm left-brained, I'm direct, I'm organized, and I feel like that shows through in my artwork and how I create it. I've always been a deeply curious person, so I like to experiment with different mediums. And then somehow in that little circle in the middle of this diagram, that's where your work is going to lie, somewhere in the mix of these three things. So I don't know if that was helpful or not, but and then I just have my email, my website, my Instagram if you'd like to connect. And then, yeah, I don't know. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Heather, for being here and your presentation.
Of course, thank you.
We have already shared your webpage, Instagram account, and
Oh,
your
perfect.
books on the chat. Just wait for having new followers on the next couple of hours on Instagram for sure. Our
Okay.
community really like to like people, to follow new people, and also that's a great way that you can really see other experimental artists. I'm always saying it's not just following for following, but if not, the system, the algorithm just give you advertising. If you follow the people that you like and you continue this commitment, then you are going to see more and more and more experimental art in your field, in your feed, and then you are going to get inspired. This is something that we love about this platform. We were born with Instagram, and we use it as much as possible to try to show the work of our artists. Heather, I just keep in my mind this idea that you say about how connected was the technique that you're using for taking photographs. I mean, something that is from one side expired, but that is going to miss. I mean, there are no way to keep creating them. Is kind of a metaphor of this amazing forest that you have the great opportunity of having a cabin down there. I think that is a great connection between the concept, the form, and the idea that you want to show. This is something that I'm always commenting also with my students. How can you find, for your projects the best way? And I think this is a great tip. And this is what we need to look for, something that is coherent. I mean, using the technique, not the technique that you know, but using the technique that you need for the concept that you are developing. And in this case, I think what you are doing is perfectly fine with this idea of joining perfect things together, And I really want to see the last picture of this project, because it can be a black one, a white one, or nothing else, And this just is kind of the end of the thing, or even yourself looking for new films, on eBay, for taking more pictures of all this story. I think the story is pretty powerful, and this is the perfect context for the image and the project that you are creating.
Yeah, thank you so much. You always
Thank
give
you so
such good
much.
critique.
I don't remember the conversation that you said that I tell you something, but I don't know if it was good for you. I'm really
It
happy
was.
of saying that.
You really helped me. You pushed
And
me.
also, you were here in 2021, isn't it, for the festival?
Yes, I was.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be back before 2030.
Okay, I can promise you that.
Also, for people in the US, you were doing something also in summer, some kind of summer camp or something. You are going to do it again this summer?
Yeah, actually, thank you for bringing that up. I invite artists to my property in upstate New York every summer. And the application is due April 15th this year. And then I'll be doing interviews afterwards. But yeah, you can join me for a week this summer, making artwork in the forest.
That's great. Where can they find the information?
On my webpage. I'll post a link in the chat.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you, Pablo.
good. If you have questions, just put all your questions in the chat. We are going to go now with our next presenter, guest, Susan Bernstein. I'm saying it correctly. Susan, welcome.
Well, hello. Good morning for me. Good evening for most of you. It's quite early here in Los Angeles, so forgive me if I'm a little creaky this morning because it's way early to give a talk for me, but I'll do my best, I'm still sleeping basically. But nice to meet everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I see a few of my students, so hello, and a lot of new people that I've never met, so that's great. I thinned down my talk because I know this is only 15 or 20 minutes, but what I love to do in my talks is give a little teachings just like Heather did, which can help you inspire you along the path. And generally, I mean, I didn't know much about this festival. I didn't know about you. You just reached out to me and I'm like, well, this is interesting, experimental. That's what I'm all about. So I feel like I'm with my people. Welcome, people. Um,
Welcome,
so,
Susan.
well, thank you, my friend. Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. So I don't know if you guys know anything about my work. Now let me see. I'm going to share a screen, and what I'm going to start out and do, because, I've been around forever, but that doesn't mean you know me or know who I am or what I do. So what I'm going to do really quick, and what I always do, is start out with a little, oh wait, you know what? I have to share this again because I didn't share it right, because I have a little audio in this. So hold on, let me make sure the audio is on this. Yep, there we go. It says yes, allow the microphone. Hopefully this will work, because hopefully. All right. All right. So I'm going to start out with a little couple minute video, movie, whatever of my work, in case you don't know who I am. Give you a little overview, and here we go. Alrighty, so that's a little overview of the last 20 years of my life, just a little bit of time. But what I want to start out with is what I generally start out with in every single one of my classes. And I always ask every student what makes a great photograph, because you can learn a technique, or there's many different elements of what makes great photographs, but what really is the essence of what makes a great photograph? And if we had more time, I would really like to know what everybody says to this response, because I can identify who you are as a photographer by the way that you answer this question. And there's no right answer, but the way that you answer this question says a lot about who you are and what you look for and how you see the world. But how I answer it and how I teach is that a great photograph is a search for meaning. And that is the key word, meaning. How do you find your meaning? But what I see is it starts by asking a question, a great photograph, and it can proceed to ask more and more questions. It doesn't provide the answers per se, it asks questions. In your photographs, ask yourself, what meaning are you searching for? It's a question that motivates you to continue to unravel the mystery. That's the core of your imagery, and it's the through line of your work. Therefore, all images are self-portraiture when you're talking about personal work. It's a snippet of your reflection, your personal view on the world. There is nothing new under the sun in terms of photography. I've been teaching photography for 20 years, and the only thing new about photography is your vision, who you are, the elements that make you as a person and how you see the world. So I ask the question why to my students over and over and over, because that's the essence. It's not about, well, I can tell you when you're writing a statement, it's about the essence of what, how, how, and why. Those are the questions that you're going to answer basically in terms of what you're doing, right? But why are you doing this? That is the core. So how do I answer that question? How do I help my students? And if I had more time, but I had to thin this really out, I would go and give you all the questions and the answers to go with and how to find these things within yourself. But we don't have enough time in this talk. But I can give you the overview in terms of how I break down and I ask my students to answer all these questions which define their subject, their composition and aesthetic, their narrative, their mood, their emotion, and the big question. The big question's the tricky one, right? So I'm going to use myself as an example, because you're here to you're here to see everybody, but it's me who's talking. So I'm going to use myself as sort of an example of how I break these things down. So in terms of my subject, it really does come deep within myself. When I was a little kid, I suffered a severe trauma that I should not have lived through. How I lived through it, we don't know. But the ramifications were that when I was a little kid, I developed night terrors. If you guys don't know what night terrors are, they're a little different than nightmares because you cannot wake up from them. You know they are happening, but you cannot wake up. And nobody can wake you up. It's this very bizarre situation where a lot of kids have them, and a lot of parents out there will know what these are. But mine lasted my entire childhood and even went into my adulthood because it was so severe. So my mom had to come up with a way to deal with this, because I was impossible. As a child, I was like a walking nightmare, literally. But she was an artist and a musician. So she came up with the idea of having me wake up from these situations and start to create art about and redefine what I just experienced. But at the end of that, I'd sort of make up a new ending, a positive ending, because these are so traumatizing, these situations. And she'd say, just rethink it and do something happy, or whatever, put another spin on it. And that became my process as an artist, if that makes sense. When I look at the world and I'm looking at the darkness, I am searching for the light. And you can see that in all of my images because I'm playing with the light and the dark. And you can see that the light always comes through in a very ethereal way. Well, the first thing that made me start to see as an artist is we moved from Miami to Chicago when I was 6. And my mom, being an artist, she'd take me to the Art Institute almost every weekend. She was obsessed with the Art Institute. And I saw this painting on the wall by Seurat, and it blew me away when I was 6 years old. And I kept looking at it and going like, where did they get those dots? How did they put it all together? And I swear it's my obsession with grain to this day and film. It's what this set me up. But it's how I started to see the Impressionism. And I'm going to skip through a long extended conversation about how I see because we don't have time. But when I was 8 years old, my mom, as I was working through these night terrors and how she was helping me through them, she was also a hobbyist, a photography hobbyist, and she had all these crappy cameras around the house. It was the worst possible cameras you can imagine, like in terms of optics. And when I was about 8, she handed me this terrible camera. We loaded up with that cartridge that it came with, and she said, go out and shoot the world. Let me see how you see the world. So I went out for one day and shot the world and came back with my little cartridge. We dropped it off at the pharmacy. Took about a week to get our little square prints back. And as we sat down, she looked at my pictures and she said, you're going to be a photographer. And that set me up for life, basically. I'm going to skip through the whole beginnings, but I immersed myself in photography my entire childhood. Went to college, but I ended up studying film because was burning out a little bit at the end. And I went to Hollywood and I was really making it in Hollywood for several years. I was the director of development of Warner Brothers. I mean, I was working at ABC Monday Night Football. I was doing all these things. I was working on Seinfeld, and I was like at the top of my game, but something happened. My mom was murdered. So that set me right back into night terrors. Yeah, I know I'm saying that in a very, it's too hard for me to say it usually. So when that happened, it pulled the world, it pulled the rug out of my everything out. I couldn't cope. And I couldn't do Hollywood anymore because Hollywood is dealing with illusion and, telling stories. And I could only deal with life in a real way. So I started thinking about what I could do to cope with these newfound night terrors at the age of 33. And I started thinking, oh, well, if I paid homage to my mother and I started photographing again, I would journal my dreams and my night terrors and go out and photograph them. But I tried every camera known to mankind, large format, medium format, you name it, every printing technique you can imagine, platinum, gum, everything. Nothing came out the way that I saw my world. So I started, one of my boyfriends at the time, he gave me a whole gun. He's like, well, this kind of sounds like what you're looking for. And I'm like, oh, this is really fun. This is really fun. You're shooting in a different way with these toy cameras from, like really from your heart, instead of conceptualizing in your head and thinking about f-stops and, and shutter speeds. You don't have a lot of control over these things. And you would get some really interesting effects. But then I found out about this Diana camera, which was similar, but it had a more ethereal look. And I was really into it for a while. And I started pulling them apart and rebuilding them because my dad was an inventor and he always challenged us. He said, if you see something that doesn't exist, make it, right? So they say these toy cameras can only do this. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't believe that. So I started pulling them apart, rebuilding them. I made them like, macros and telephotos and all different things, but it still wasn't quite where I wanted to. So I wasn't getting that sort of glow that I needed or this ethereal feeling that I really was going for. So this is where the second sort of element in the way that I determine what you're trying to do and your personal vision is, and it's about composition and aesthetic. And because I couldn't get there, my dad challenged me and he said, well, make your own camera. And I'm like, well, I can't. Oh, wait a minute. I know how to pull apart toy cameras. I can rebuild those. Let me make my own prototype. So I did. took me about a year to make my own prototype based on sort of a brownie situation, but also with the shutter. And I have bellows in there, and my bellows are garbage bags. They're literally plastic black garbage bags with rubber around it, so I get a little bit of flexibility. I mold my lenses out of hobby plastic, and they're all very unique to themselves with different elements in them. My first cameras, I had to judge the distance like a rangefinder. I ended up learning how to do sort of a makeshift sort of SLR situation with mirrors. So I have about 24 of them now, and they have different shutter speeds. I can only do about 1 to 3 shutter speeds in each one. But this was my first my test print, my first test image, and the first roll that I ever shot. And my dog was in the backyard, and I looked at the light bouncing off off of her nose, and I'm like, wow, that's really beautiful. And I took a shot. I took, I think, 4 shots actually, and this was the first shot. And when I got the negatives back, I'm like, okay, this is it. Yeah, I nailed it. This is what I want to do. Now, how do I put it together? So I started going out and photographing after I'd have a night terror, and I'd try to pull the symbolism of my night terrors out, or the metaphors of my night terrors. And this is the first successful image that I did in terms of trying to pull all those elements together. I was in London at the time at Paddington Station, and it was a few days before the 7/7 bombings. And I was down there, and I had a really bad dream about, I won't even, it's kind of prolific because it was about explosions and stuff, so we won't even go in there. But I went down there and I took this photograph and I went, okay, this is it. Now, how do I keep it going? So I just kept shooting. And for the next, several years, I got a body of work, and I had a blog out there and people started following me. And before you know it, like within a year, I had a gallery representing me. It was just like this bizarre situation where it was just meant to be. It all just kind of, I didn't seek gallery. I didn't even know what a fine art photographer was. I just sort of landed in it. And within a few years, I had my first book. And by the end of this sort of chapter, I thought, okay, I'm done with this. I've worked through my night terrors. They're not here. So I don't have any material. I guess I'm done with this photography thing. I'll go back to Hollywood, or I'll go back to my writing career. But this thing happened where 2009, right at the edge of this body of work, my father suffered a massive stroke, and he's a former football player, and I had to sit there and take care of this man, this massive man. I had to take care of him for the last 6 months of his life, and the night terrors came flooding back as soon as he died. But they were different. My dreams were different at this point. They looked different. They were a different perspective. At first, you could see that I was a lot closer to the human subject. It was more about my mom and struggling with the loss of that feminine part of the world. And this was more about the overall arching of the world. If you look at it, you'll see a lot of sky. It's because me and my father would fly together, and he was a pilot, I was a pilot. So anyway, just super going through this super fast because I know in the interest of time, I don't want to run out of time for you guys. The end of that chapter, when I worked through that, this was the book that we produced, that I'm very, 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 I love this book so much. It's sold out, it's not available, but it's my pride and joy in terms of my books. So then something else happened. I thought, okay, I'm done. Once again, I'm done. I worked through the night terrors. But in 2016, when my country sort of shifted, I started having night terrors again because, in a sense, my country is sort of a personality to me. It's my identity, because when I was a little kid, I grew up with the pride of being, my grandfather came over from Sweden, and he was an immigrant, and he really became a self-made man. And he had the first radio store, the first television store in Chicago. And he was proud of being an American. And so my father used to take us on these RV trips every summer to all the national iconic locations, like the cityscapes and the national parks and all these amazing places which showed the pride of America. So I sort of really developed this incredible pride about, who we were and what our land was. And so my parents would take us on these, just cover all the highways and the byways and sort of really show us what this country was through the land. But when the country sort of changed, and I won't make any statements, but it really shocked me. And these night terrors were disturbing me. So I decided what I would do as an adult would go back to these places where I'd put my tripod holes right where I was as a child and where I discovered this incredible, immense pride, and take photographs again and talk about the iconology and the universal consciousness of the American dream. So that's where this comes from. And I started in 2016, and now we're in a whole different place. I haven't finished it yet because of the pandemic and all these different things. But now it's shifting once again, and it's much more dramatic. So we'll see where it ends up. But that is where I am right now. And I know I don't want to go over, so I'm going to wrap that up and tell you that's just where I am. That'll be my next book. I'm going to end with a comment that I always tell my students is that you shoot with your heart, not your head. If you start thinking about what's going on in all the technology, everything that you got to shoot with, you're going to be lost. It's the question of what's in your heart. How do you feel? That's my question to all my students. When you look out in the world, how do you feel? And how does that get represented in your imagery? That is the core of who you are and what your work is. So shoot with your heart and not your head. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Susan, for being slept. You did it really, really well. Thank you. It was a great presentation, and I think all our students and participants are going to be happy of knowing your work. Just one technical question about your last project. You're using exactly the same camera, but color film?
No, I have 24 cameras. Oh, but they all, I mean, I could use black and white or color in any of them.
No, but in your last project that is color, I mean, you are using the same cameras as in the black and white ones?
Yes. Yeah, they're the same cameras.
Nice. And you are creating new cameras, or you are using one of these 21s that were more or less used in the past? Any technical developments for this new project? That might be the question.
So for years I was building cameras because there was something that I was always looking for in maybe a different ability in the camera. So I went for about 24. I've been stuck on number 25 for a couple years now because it's I want to do some nighttime shooting, and creating shutters and all these different things is a little bit complicated, and my life kind of went a little bit sideways. So there's one on the counter that's been sitting there for quite some time. So number 25, and I name all my cameras after musicians, and we're not sure which one this one's going to be, but it's sitting there waiting for me to finish it.
Nice, great. We really love your work, and we are happy also that now Experimental Photo Festival and our school, you see that we have a big community, a lot of people trying to learn on the internet over these alternative creating experimental techniques. It was a pleasure to have you here. Are you staying till the end of our conversation, or you have to leave or something?
I could stay a few more minutes, but I have to teach at 10:30. So,
Okay, what we can do now is go into questions. If you have questions for Susan, we have one. Just put them on the chat. Susan, do you have any tips for snapping yourself out of it when you get too in your head with your art making process?
Yeah, breathe. I know I tell my students, breathe. I know that sounds stupid, but what the problem is when you're in your head, you need to get out of your head. You need to close your eyes and breathe and just be. And how are you feeling is the question. And how are you going to represent that in your work? It really is that simple.
Great. I remember once I had a conversation with one of my students who was not inspired. And I say, maybe you don't need to take more pictures. You need to go to yoga. And that might connect you with your body. And that will give you the inputs of what you are feeling. And I think he was terrible he didn't receive this comment on the best way, so to say, the politically correct way. But I do think it's pretty important. I mean, we need to know ourselves to be really deeply connected with our feelings, to be sure that what we are doing is not just a technique, it's not just showing the reality that we are seeing, but something personal. If you really want to do an artistic, if you want to have an artistic approach, you need to put yourself in the middle, not just using the medium. And for that, it's so important that we know what we want, what we need, where we come from. I mean, that is pretty important. This is my recommendation. I can save you a couple of hours of mentorship. Just saying for you, go to yoga first if you are not inspired.
Go to yoga. Well, you know, it's
Uh,
like, and I also say that technical things can be learned. It's, you know, who are you and what what are you trying to say is so important. So, yeah.
we have another question asking if there are any post-processing in your images, or this is just straight from the camera.
Most of them are straight from the camera. You know, there's a very minimal taking dust out, little bit of, I mean, little tiny elements. I'm a purist and always have been. So what you're seeing is everything is from my camera. And the manipulation of my lens, and when I move my hand, that's where you're seeing the effects. You know, I'm actually bending the lens. So there's no way to replicate that in a sense. I've seen people try to do that in Photoshop and they send them to me. I'm like, no. Uh-uh.
Are are you also doing your own copies?
My own printing?
Yes.
Yes, my own printing, because it's kind of essential when you're in galleries to do your own printing. I guess not. I mean, now I guess some people do have, have other printers and but my galleries like that their artists print.
Great. Another questions, what are the shutter speeds for those cameras?
They all vary, I mean, the most typical, if I have 1 to 3, it's somewhere between a 30th, a 60th, and a 200th. But the reason why I carry like 3 cameras at a time is because then I can vary my shutter speeds. I know that sounds crazy, but I have different shutter speeds in every camera. And then I'm like, oh, here's my situation. And when I'm shooting, I sort of layer neutral density filters and things like that to cut the light down. It's very old fashioned, old time, almost like, screwing in the the apertures. I mean, that's as rudimentary as it is.
Great. We have another question. If you have more questions, just put them there. We have a couple of more minutes. Someone was asking about the lens. Are you melting some materials to morph plastic to add to the image softening result?
If I understand that correctly, I am molding hobby plastic. And I have a mold. The mold is the same that I use for every camera, but I do put other elements in the hobby plastic, and they do vary for different lenses, which is why sometimes you'll see slightly different effects. It's because I'm bending the light a little bit differently in each one. I think I answered that question. Is that what they were?
I think so. I just read it literally. Okay. Another question about if you have any idea when your new book is going to be available, because as you said, the other ones are sold out. I think there are a lot of people wanting to have at least one of yours waiting for the new one.
Yeah, good question. I, here's the thing with books, and it's the thing that you guys might not know, but most artists have to put money into their books, and it's a considerable amount of money. Unless you get lucky and you land with somebody like Radius or something who's going to support your book. But I am exhausted from 2016's book still, because I use a lot of interesting techniques to raise funds, because my first book was done in a way where I don't even want to talk about it. It was a nightmare, but I don't want to do it either way next time because it's a question of raising funds. And it's not that I'm sure I'll get a publisher in a second, but it's about the money. So, and it's about my energy level of raising that money. So as soon as I get back to some energy, I'll do it because it's ready to go, I'm sure. But it's just a question of who I'd want to publish with, how much money I want to put into, all those kind of things. And I may even self-publish this time, to be honest, because my friend Henry Hornstein, if you know his work, he's an icon. You know, we've been talking about it for a while. Like, he's like, why don't you just self-publish? You've sold out all your books. There's no point of going with a publisher, because right now, this is a whole nother conversation. I don't know if you want to know about this, but distribution of a book is right through Amazon half the time, right? And it's different channels that anybody can get to. So a lot of people want to publish with a legitimate publisher. I've already done that twice. I don't really need to do it again. But even if you were new at it, you can still get your stuff on Amazon, right? So distribution's another kind of question of whether I'm going to just self-publish or what. But and I may just do that because that sounds fun to me. But so I wish I could answer your question of when. I think when I get energy to do it, it's the work is there. It's just a question of when. So
Okay,
hopefully.
the content is more or less closed. I mean, we don't need to wait till the end of these 4 years government to see the images.
Oh God, if I make it, who knows? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that politically. I shouldn't say that. I probably just upset somebody, but yeah. But no, I kind of feel like it might happen in the next year or so. I just don't know if I'm so booked up with workshops and teaching, and my brain needs to be there. And when you do a book, your whole life goes out the window. I'm just telling you right now. It's like you are just everything's about that book, and it's an exhausting process. So I want to make sure I'm there mentally, and because I'm one of those teachers that's 100% for my students when I'm teaching. So I got to make sure my energy's right when I decide to do it.
Sure. If you just publish it yourself or with someone else, and when you have it, if you want to share it, we will be happy to share with our community.
Oh,
And for sure,
thank you very much.
Some of them for sure will buy it because it's pretty interesting. As you can see, we have here on our association a huge library with books and photo books. It will be nice to have also one copy here with us. I think we have a last question just to let you get ready for your next class about
Appreciate that. Thank you.
writing artist statements, how you elaborate them or how you work, and what's your recommendation for students. Is kind of a general question.
I teach I recently taught a whole I did like a webinar on this, and I have a whole philosophy on statements. Now I'm a curator also. I've curated over 50 shows. I'm a juror for a lot of things, and I read a lot of bad statements. And they really should be very short and sweet. I'm going to tell you right now, nobody has the brainwidth to read something a page long. So guys, if you are overwriting, please don't, save our souls, please. And so what I tell my students, really you can get there in 4 or 5 sentences and get out. And I'll give you a little bit of tip on terms of, because it's a whole class of how to get there. My intention, if you answer the questions of my intention, you have the fundamentals of what you're talking about, right? And then the question is, if you're going to shorten it brief, how I used to write log lines for movies all the times where I'd had to write 120-minute film or an entire book in 1 sentence. So it is a possibility that you can do this, right? But what I tell people is the what, how, why. Follow that, and you're in and out. Answer those questions. And in that order, may I say, and if you start giving me a lot of history and fluffiness at the beginning, I'm going to chop it off. It is right to the point. Give me a little mood also at the beginning. Give me what you're feeling in your words, if that makes, because the only way, I'm not going to be talking to you when I'm looking at your work. The only way you can communicate who you are is through your words. So make sure you talk this out with people. Another little tip, I always tell my students to record it as they talk, what this is about, because you don't want to should I say, you don't want to write from your head, you want to write heart also, because I'm a writer. I mean, I'm a professional writer also. So this is where I write from. If I write from here, I'm dead. So give me some emotion, get that atmosphere of where you're writing from. Because if you go MFA on me, I'm out. I'm out. If you start giving me MFA stuff, or if you say capture, I'm out. You know, I mean, no offense, but these are words that are just like made up words. Capture. Where did that come from? I don't know. But forgive me, that's my old analog self speaking to you guys, and it's not fair, but it's just who I am. If I see it, I just personally, I'm like, if you take that out of your statement. And Melanie, I can see you, you know, I've beat you up on your statement, and I've rewritten your statement 1,000 times with you. And she's going, yes, but it was worth it, right? Because it's who she is, and you just you thin it out. Give yourself 4 to 5 if you go over like 2 short paragraphs, nobody's going to read it. So just telling you, you know, like as a
Thank you.
curator, cut.
Yes, and also now we have to read 500 proposals in a week. I mean, we can't read tons of proposals, tons of ideas, tons of comments, tons of. It's important to go directly to what you are, what you want, what you are showing. Okay, thank you so much, Susan, for being here with us. It was a pleasure. You have a lot of energy. You are going to enjoy a lot this day. Thank you so much for being here. And when you have your book, just send it to us and we will share it with our community. Good. Thank you so much. I'm just going to take this and this. It's a pity that Susan can't stay, but you can imagine she has a lot of things to do today, and we have a long list. This is always happening because we always do this class on Wednesday at the same time, and it's kind of hard for the connection with the different people. I mean, it's hard, but it was really good having her here. And we have 50 more minutes, 47, 45, 45, 43 with Anne. Eder, today, also really happy to have you here, professor at Agora. We are really fan of your work. I'm just going to start with a short presentation, and then you can just go also with your images. She's an interdisciplinary artist and educator known for experimental approach. She teaches at Princeton, Harvard, and Penumbra Foundation, Santa Fe workshops, and the Griffin Museum. If something of this is not correct, you can also let us know. She merged historical photographical process, science, and contemporary concept with a strong focus on sustainable practices. She has exhibited internationally, including solo shows at the Haylight Project, A. Smith Gallery, and has been featured in Frames, Lens Culture, Analog Forever magazine. And she was one of the top 10 most exciting photographers of 2017. I think that is the best things that we can say. And to start, let's excite us with your work. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Pablo. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly fine.
Good. Well, I feel at an amazing disadvantage following those two. They were so brilliant. And I'm going to take just a slightly different tact, but they're both amazing artists. I love both of their work. And Heather Squash has always been one of my favorites. And Susan's work, of course, is just amazing. So let me get my screen shared here. And thank you so much for having me today. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, consider this a self-portrait. It's I've kind of always been a square peg in a world of round holes. I'm a messy artist. I'm not nearly as focused and linear as it feels like my peers are, but my practice includes sculpture, installation work, and storytelling in addition to photography. And I won't go into my academic credentials because Pablo's already done that. So I'm just going to kind of move forward. I do specialize in historic, analog, and experimental photography. And I also teach classes in more sustainable photographic practices, which is a big part of my focus right now. So I've worn a lot of hats, although this is arguably one of my favorites. And if I really chart out everything that brought me to this particular place right now, including how long I've been at this, it just starts to resemble a murder board, So it's kind of a lot of entangled things that led to the voice that I have right this minute. I've been a musician, I've been an artist, I've been a business owner, and significantly, I was a single mom basically for most of my adult life. So relative to that, everything else is easy. It taught me the value of composing a life and like broadening the meaning of creativity. It meant I didn't always have the luxury of time to spend on my own work. But in the creative marketplace, I learned discipline. I learned how to budget and meet deadlines. I worked with a range of materials, and all of those things have really come to serve me well in my personal work. So I'm going to look at a sort of time-based look at, what I'm thinking about is how finding your gaze and your voice changes over time and it evolves over time. I mean, it's really, it's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. I didn't come to working the way I do overnight. So let's just kind of, take a look at how that evolved. And also the thing to become aware of over time, your voice is going to change based on, your reaction to the world around you. It's going to react to changes in your life, your environment. It's going to be different as you acquire new skills. So your voice changes. It's not always the same, but there's generally threads that are consistent. And that's kind of what I'm going to focus on, is like how the work changes over time, but like what stays important is something that you need to be aware of, because it helps you when you go back to your authentic voice. It gets you back to that authentic self, which, honestly, I agree with everything that Heather and Susan said. We're on the same page 100%. So at first, I'm just going to give a little background, and I'll quickly sort of move forward into the approach I'm using now. Things that stuck with me: love of physical photographs. I have just always been drawn to photographs as objects and as kind of like fossils. That's sort of what they are to me. I find physical photographs absolutely irresistible. Just want to touch them. And I still make physical photographs all the time. Vernacular photography, family photo albums, snapshots, any photo that I can hold in my hand, read the back of, stick on a fridge, or stick in my pocket. So this is, by the way, my mother, and she does not look any happier today, I'll just say. This is my grandmother, my dad, and me. So, clearly looking at those family pictures had a sort of outsized influence on me. Now, interestingly, like Susan, at age 8, I was given a Brownie camera. So I was really interested to hear that when she said it. So like from an early age, I was shooting medium format film, and I was developing my own by the time I was in high school. And it was both how I saw and how I mediated the world around me, which was often a very unsafe place for me as a child. Along with that came a love of any kind of device that would give me a physical image, and or used a physical image, like the old Viewmasters with their tiny little slides. I freaking loved them, and then even crappy cameras. And I know Susan was showing some of those too, but like the Game Boy camera that printed out on heat thermal rolls, any kind of physical photograph was what I really loved. Now, when I started out, like plenty of young photographers, I began in a fairly straightforward documentary manner. And I only ever wanted to shoot black and white. I'm still a freak about color, like a control freak, and I really prefer adding it myself and very selectively. So I was self-taught, even though I did have some great mentors. And, I was doing, like I say, sort of intimate portraiture and, shooting my family or shooting, the world around me in black and white. I was apprenticing with an AP photographer who taught me my early darkroom skills. And then I also worked in an analog printing lab, retouching for other photographers and printing for them, which is an amazing way to hone your skills. So I was working, as a lot of young artists do, in self-portraiture and in sort of feminist gestures with that. But I quickly moved beyond silver gel into combining methods. So these are actually xerographic prints, which are similar to like risograph now. So I was playing with double exposures. I was playing with collage. I was transferring images onto fabric, playing with, Canon and Xerox copy machines, and, making these silver gelatin images and xerographic prints, wall hangings, and art to wear. So, just like sculptural photography, wearable art, transfers on silk. It's always embarrassing to show your early work, but hey, it's where I came from, and brings us to the fast forward to now, to the present. So while photography is one language that I speak, I feel like my native tongue is plant. So like Heather, I'm very involved with the natural world in my work, and my concerns about it are very broad. So I'm going to talk about a little bit of how I go from installation work to images, which is something that I teach because, my own work being interdisciplinary, I teach photographic processes, individually, but I also do a lot of interdisciplinary teaching and, teaching people how to combine processes and sort of bring, other aspects of what they're looking for into what they're doing. So these are just some of the things that are like, that I know have stayed with me over time. So I have this lifelong advocacy for increased art practice. So growing up, I wasn't from a wealthy or educated family. I didn't have supportive parents. I did have some good teachers along the way that introduced me to things and fostered my curiosity, nurtured my intelligence. But, I didn't have that kind of world. I wasn't from that sort of a world. Materiality and the importance of tactility and experiential engagement is important to me. And that is both in my installation work and my print work. I prefer a solid print that is an object and that you can touch and hold, and that has a tactile appeal. Like I said, the natural world, a broad interest from everything from cell structures to fractal patterns to environmental concerns, and, ultimately to how geography and geology give rise to these discrete myths and folklore, and even our religions. It just plays such a huge role in those things. And I use a lot of fiction in my work. I use fiction as an entry point, and I'm working with fiction as a big part of the stories I tell, even when I'm doing documentary work. And the other thing that influences my, how I take things on is my role as an educator, because not only do I feel like I need to, set an example, but I also, I learn from my students every day. It's amazing. I can teach something to 100 people and I'll get 100 people approaching it differently. So, I use this fairy tale structure as a point of entry. The familiarity of that structure lets viewers sort of move into the work with ease. And, if you look at the prevalence of fictional forms in nearly every culture, it's really hard not to make an argument that it's not a form of an evolutionary survival mechanism. I think that, stories give us hope. They convince us that we can get through obstacles from one place to another. They explain the world. We use fiction, and, look at the consumption of fiction that we take part in. We're surrounded by books, movies, television. So, I use fiction a lot in the work I'm making. And it's, really not exaggerating to say that the books really saved my life, from like Beowulf to The Hobbit, Fairy Tales of All Stripes, Amos Tutuola, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, comics like Swamp Thing and, the Hernandez brothers. So these were all things that sort of play into my own, shaping of the aesthetics that I work in. Now, let's see. So I'm gonna jump forward to Tales from the Fells. So basically, when I was free to go to graduate school, finally, I entered into a period of very deep reflection on the ethical quandaries of the photographic medium, of which I think there are many that are inherent. Now, these are all platinum palladium prints, and all of these are from the installation work that I do. I mean, these are basically shots that I take at my installations, and they are printed in platinum palladium. In this case, I chose platinum palladium because, I was dealing with these sort of dark tales and they're heavily chiaroscuroed images, and nothing really does detail in your shadows like platinum palladium. So it has this velvety texture. So it was kind of hitting all my marks for, the type of images that I wanted to make. I started working collaboratively with my subjects, but then eventually I just started building everything that went into my frame. So that's what you were seeing earlier with the plant creatures and all. I'm building these like 10, 12-foot creatures. I'm putting them out as public installation work first, and then documenting them as they go into like a decomposition phase and start to sort of go back to the natural world. So I'm sort of also, with work like this and, monsters and ghosts, which I work with a lot, I'm playing with notions of veracity in photography, like of indexicality and, sort of further framing things, as part of, even family photos. So I was trying to document the creatures I was building in platinum palladium, and I was really not quite satisfied yet. I was like, it's okay, but it's not really doing what I want. And it really wasn't until I started documenting them in Anthotype that I felt like I had found the right language. So a lot of times when I'm working, it's like it takes me a while. I'm doing many iterations of photographs before I can figure out which is the one that I feel like really is the right syntax, the right language for that particular body of work. And so these were exhibited at the Halide Project during the 2020 Photo Festival. And they were exhibited unframed so that the smell of the woods could permeate the gallery. And it did. And it was the best thing for me to hear people come in and say, wow, it smells like the woods in here. So I have video of the show, but I'll only bring it up if there's time at the end. So these are the sorts of installations. And like I said, I finally, in addition to, working in 3 dimensions and then documenting, I sort of reached a point, I got ahead of myself a little bit with my dialogue, excuse me. So I'm using these sort of seductively tactile elements in my installations and inviting people to interact with them, including leaving handmade books on site and, allowing people to pick up elements of the installation and play. Sometimes they're not in the woods. I just loved it when I would go visit this guy. There would just be like some old guy having coffee with him, So I like to put things out in the world and let people interact with them while they're in this, 3-dimensional state. So I did get to a point where I no longer wanted to contribute to the glut of commodities. So, I didn't want to focus on art as a marketplace, because and this goes to intent and finding your voice too, because when the work becomes about commodity, it changes what you will create. Okay, so you may have an idea and then you'll think, oh, that would never sell. And then you don't make that thing, and I feel like, maybe that's the most important thing you would have made, because it was something you wanted to make that was important to you, but you thought it wouldn't sell. So this is something that, I kind of divorced myself from a little bit when I'm working. And I can only make what I can make because it kind of is directly out of who I am. And, I'm not really thinking about it in terms of sales. I'm thinking more sustainably, than I used to when I was younger. I'm also just like everything that I build is designed to go right back to the earth again. So I'm accepting the ephemerality of art, of our bodies, of this world. And that's sort of at the core of my practice now is the idea of reciprocity, so I'm thinking about the plants, everything I use is a gift from the earth. I'm using plants that I use to make images or developers or creatures, and then metal salts and minerals that we mine from the earth to make traditional photographs. So, being reciprocal dictates that I have to take care of that world and also disseminate knowledge through my classes and my photographic panels in, getting people to care about it and take care of it themselves. So this is just a really short little video, showing like the process of going from, 3 dimensions to 2 dimensions and how the material takes one shape and then another shape. And, I'm constantly sort of moving back and forth between 2 and 3 dimensions. And even when I'm when I'm building, I'm always photographing because it's basically how I see. And so this is just, like I say, from sketch to maquette, to, platinum print or, I can hear my thing rocking here. Okay. I'm going to skip this one. This is just about installation. I don't want to go too long because we don't have that much time, but installation artists, I mean, I am very concerned with access. Like I said, I didn't have access to a lot of arts when I was younger. So I do, the creation of public art is a dedicated part of my practice. So installation work is kind of a way of life, basically. I'm not going to play this whole thing, but it's like sometimes I'm in bogs, but I actually hate being on the computer working on Photoshop, and I'd almost rather be like getting stung by mosquitoes in the swamp building these things. And then, I do installations in public parks, in green spaces, throughout the Northeast, and they have different, there's a lot of different types that I'm using, but the themes are the same. I'm using this kind of fairy tale-ish structure for people to enter into. And I use a lot of shapes that are about transformation, like cocoons and chrysalis shapes and things like that. And then I'm just basically, I'm documenting them throughout the seasons. Seems very loud. And until they're completely through the entropic phase. I'm going to move on. This one is actually a newer work where the books that I mentioned leaving on site, I've got those. I decided to let those decompose as well, and they have images in them. So this, I'm only going to show a partial clip of this, but when I opened the book, as I kind of anticipated, that's for Scale the dog. There's all kinds of things living in it, So I'm actually decomposing images on site, and I had to open the book very carefully because the pages are, starting to fall apart. But the end result, I found the images so much more interesting than they were before this happened to them. So, I would say in terms of how does this apply to finding your vision, be experimental. When I'm teaching, I'm basically trying to create students who are thinkers, not followers. I try to give them a safe environment for experimenting, for like forming a hypothesis and then testing it, and then taking what you learn from that one and moving on to the next. You're sort of working with the tools that you have, and then you learn how to make another tool. So this is just sort of, I know I'm going pretty far outside of the realm of traditional photo work here, but this is a lot to do with how I work. And I just loved the fungal root systems and mycorrhizal systems that developed on the surface of the paper. So I'm hoping to do an exhibit with these prints at some point. So I'm talking content to process. And this is another series where that was really important. So content to process is, kind of the crux of it all, right? I mean, we're looking at what lifts process up to the level of art making. And in my own work, I feel like, I've been very concerned about craftsmanship and materiality in photography and about photos as objects. And I'm always looking for the right syntax and the presentation that's going to be the best for the work. So in this series, which is Mysteries of Plum Island, I was approaching the documentary work in a very non-literal way. It's a sort of factual, fictional documentary of a barrier reef that's at risk due to climate change. So in the beginning, I was collecting detritus, I was photographing it in various ways and combining it into really curated grids. And when it came to doing the landscapes, though, I decided I wanted something different. And it took me a while to get there, but I ended up being satisfied with the syntax of the images here, which are the land and the ocean and the salt pans around Plum Island. So the island being at risk due to climate change, like I said, I wanted a way to actually use part of the island in the printing. So what I ended up doing was soaking the paper in seawater, and that was how I salted the paper to make silver nitrate prints. Just kind of go through some of these. And I was using various things to alter the tonal range, but a lot of the differences in the tonality of these prints came from the impurities in the seawater. So, you can see I'm very much, about throwing things at the wall and seeing, what happens to see if they'll work, and then refining that. So, this sort of hit my marks in a way. It met my requirement of relating to the site in a physical way, but also on another level by introducing this element of the primordial, which is, the inexorable, the sea, as ancient and salty, and the prints made using a salty and simple method. And then, this also, the whole series involved magical realism and constructed realities as well, with video clips. So it has 4 parts, which is the artifact grids, the landscapes, video clips, and then a curated exhibition of the actual artifacts. So getting to like recent cameraless work, which is where I teach a lot about cameraless photography right now and experimental practices. So I first was working with plants on paper. And if you've ever worked with lumens, it's like having a magic canvas. Silver gelatin paper is just reactive to everything: chemistry, heat, humidity, the strength or lack of strength of the UV rays. So I was using invasive and toxic plants for this series of Botanical Gothic. And then more recently, I work a lot in phytograms, which, Heather's also using some phytogram in her work. But these are like seasonal developers that I make. And, what is interesting for me in making these is both, I picked the plants that I use for not just the chemistry, which, as Heather mentioned, there's phenolic compounds in a lot of plants, and it's to protect themselves from pathogens and other things in the environment. But I'm also choosing them for their folkloric meanings and for their medicinal meanings. And that's not something people see when they look at the finished work, but it's a layer. For me, it's syntax. And so, I'm really working with trying to work directly on film with plants that are chosen for a variety of reasons. These are some of the images that I make on X-ray films. These are my dendies, the denizens of the ghostwood. And like I said, I'm working on big expired X-ray and medical films with plant material, and making my own developer, like Heather was in her chemograms that she was making. And then, applying it directly to the film, and then fixing it afterwards. It just seemed like the right language. The transparency of the film seemed appropriate for ghosts. And then, the choice to use invasive plants in this developer was also, I thought, appropriate, because, if ghosts are coming in from like the realm of the dead, they're invading our world, right? Even though they are my friends, I will say it is true. And then I have exhibited those on light boxes that I build from scratch using reclaimed wood. So this was at Halite Project. And then this, like I said, that's a whole thing at the gallery, but I will skip past that. I'll only go back if you want to see it and we have time. And then this is more phytogram work, which was just at Vermont Center of Photography with Women on the Edge. And for this one, the series is called Bone Set. And again, I was choosing plants for their chemical content as well as their folkloric and medicinal connections. So I was using comfrey leaves, and bone set is the nickname, and knit bone, where they're talking, they basically are medicinally used for healing. So I was constructing bones out of leaves, and I was constructing bones from other things and using the leaves to wrap them up, as, healing them. And it was just another way of finding, the voice for the images that I wanted to make. This is new work that I'm working on now. It's on Umancy, which is a way of reading eggs that you put the egg in water and you read the shapes of the egg as an oracular device. And so this is kind of an egg on egg. So we're talking about syntax. It's like, this is an albumin print over here on the left. And then on the right, I'm doing albumin and salt and then chemical silvering out to create effect. And these are going to be accompanied by the actual readings of the oracle of the egg. Now, the other thing is that I teach a class in photography on clay at Harvard. And we've tested lots of things on clay. And I'm going to just really quickly tell you where we are from left to right in a clockwise. So this is gum bichromate on a terracotta tile using Gara dry pigment. This is cyanotite. This one is platinum palladium with a little more palladium. Solar fast, which is actually way better than it should be. Cooper type, so this is copper based. This is again platinum palladium. This is a salt print on clay using a gold fluoride toner. And then this is a chrysotype, and the image is made with just gold chloride. So you can see, like, I'm in my classes and in finding my voice. Sometimes that's process driven, and these aren't these aren't final bodies of work. I'm kind of looking at finding your voice in terms of it taking time and in terms of it changing over time, and in like experimenting to sort of give yourself another language to work with. Like working on clay is a whole different language for me than working on paper. I'm also working, I have a practice that is basically in large part outside of galleries with my, installation work. And I like to do things that people can access. So I've been working on creating a card game with my images. So I guess I'm throwing out there that, you can think outside of the box when it comes to thinking of your images. Are you really looking for just gallery representation, or are you looking to make work that is authentic for you and that you feel like people can access, and it has a place in the world outside of a gallery? So in that sense, I guess I'm just sort of looking at things a little bit differently than we were talking about earlier. And these are just some of my early influences and my current reading. So like I said, I feel like that was a big fat mess compared to the previous two talks, but hopefully you'll find some inspiration there and have some questions for me.
I really like that you finish with your readings. I can imagine your bed and all of them there waiting for you for reading them.
Oh, yes. Many, 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 many books. Always reading.
Good. That's good. That's great. Thank you so much, Anne, for your presentation. It was really amazing. As everyone is saying on the comments, the work of the three of you are incredible, amazing. You have been working for years. And I really like this idea of going beyond photography. This is one of the reasons we called you today to present, to go out of the traditional printing. And I really like also what you show us with all these techniques with clay, that really the biggest part of historical 19th century techniques can be adapted and being used also for clay when you control the technique. And that's so surprising also for new kinds of photography. I mean, what we are looking for is new ways of showing. Sculptural photography is also going to be part of the future, and knowing that this is possible technically is amazing.
Yeah, working on clay is, you would think it wouldn't be that different. It's very different, because paper is textiles and clay, and it's fibers, and clay is platelets, So I've had to really, really get good with my chemistry to get them to work. but it's so satisfying when you try, and then you make something work. So right now I'm doing ferric chloride as a light trigger in a gum-like process on the clay. So fingers crossed.
And in some moment we need to have that a book of you teaching how to work in clay, because I think going to your classes might be not so easy, at least for learning these techniques. I imagine that it takes a lot of time to prepare them. I mean, it's pretty specialized, but can be really good to know exactly how these work, Might be a lot of people interested in this.
Yeah, the reason I started doing all the exploration of my own is that there isn't one. There's not a book for it. Like there's no book that I've come across that's right anyway, because they're either written by clay people who don't know about photography or photo people who don't know about clay. So I'm really trying, I am writing a book and I hope that it, gets finished, sometime soon. It'll never be finished because every time I get one process down, I find another one I have to try. But, it's just, it'll be out there one of these days, I think.
Great. I also really like your approach because it's not just capturing reality, but also modifying it. I mean, all with these sculptures that you do with
Always.
nature, you are taking reality, you're modifying it, and you want to modify reality. And then a lot of these images are, as you said, out there to interact with the reality and make us think
Yeah.
and change. I mean, this is not just photography, and I think this is on the base of what experimental photography is, looking new ways to show reality, but also changing ourselves in the process of doing and changing the reality we are living with. I think the three of you were today talking about these kind of needs that we have to be connected with politicals, with ecological aspects, and to be aware of what is happening. You are not outside of your reality, you are working with it. And I think that is a great approach for your art. Be connected with you, but also being connected with the reality you are working with.
Yeah, I mean, we're approaching art as a human being with all those dimensions that entails, and not just as photographers, So it's a much bigger thing than we usually give it space for. Like there's lots of ways to go. I feel like if Heather and Susan and I could sit down to chat, it would be great. I would love that sometime.
This is the first interaction. This is a door open for new things. Okay, we have 4 minutes. As you know, always time is clicking for us, and we also have another webinar in Spanish. This was really, really inspiring. I mean, for me personally, it was a great experience having you all here. I don't know, Laura, if there are any questions that you want to bring, or someone else, someone is writing something that might be said on these minutes. If not, I just keep with this. So many amazing images, so many years of research, so personal approach on your way of doing things. I mean, my mind is full of new ideas.
That's the goal.
I think everyone is like you for this presentation. And actually, I think we had some question for Heather for the first part. I'm not sure if we asked her. Maybe I skipped
No.
it.
No.
We didn't ask.
No, what is the question? I'll try to, actually, we only have 2 minutes left. I'll be concise.
Super fast.
I think the question was, how do you figure out the right approach or process to bring about an impactful project?
Oh, that is a good question because I do work in a variety of approaches, similar to Anne, a variety of chemical processes. I think it would have to do, it depends on the project, of course, but it would have to do with how the specific process interprets emotion in work or feeling. I know pinhole photography certainly gives a very different feeling and Susan's work, although not a pinhole camera, her handmade cameras produce a certain type of emotion within the images. So that would have to correlate. With cyanotapes, I have used them because of their color before. And I'm actually currently doing a cyanotape project on eco-dyed papers based on a development lot in my town. They just cleared a 20-acre forest for development. And so I'm using the cyanotape because of its historical connection with engineering. And so sometimes it has to do with the history of the approach. Other times it's the feeling of the approach. Sometimes it's the color. There's a variety of reasons why. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, I do think so. Okay. we're just closing today conversation. We are really happy. We had 95 people on our top moment on the conversation, and I just want to finish this conversation because we are, as you know, in the months of women's. We are really happy having these 3 women with us today, and then we have 3 more in Spanish. I just want to finish today with a surprise because we are just doing a special. We normally don't do this, but this time we decided it was a good idea to make a special offer for our students and also for our students who wants to come to the festival. There are options for both of you because we have just arrived to 30,000 subscribers to our newsletter. And this was crazy when we thought this at the beginning with Laura. We just started with a crazy idea on double exposure. Let's do something. Let's start an Instagram account, whatever. And then it gets crazy, as you know, working hard over the last 7 years. We think that this is a moment to celebrate. It's always good. The festival is coming. The Agora is the last chance to join because someone was asking. We are closing the school for the summer, but then we are going to be back in October with the new classes. But now is the moment to get into the diploma. If you want, we're starting in April the 9th with our last round, and that's the best moment because you can get all the first class and then you can have all summer to practice, or winter if you are on the other side of the world. But I think it's a great opportunity. You are going to receive tomorrow this offer on your email. This is the diploma with 2 online workshops during the online festival, or the ticket for the festival with 1 ticket, with 1 workshop, and we give you another one for free. That means that you can really have the ticket for the festival as the price of the early bird, that this is just 180 euros. That's it. Thank you so much for being here. Happy to have Susan, Heather, and Anne with us. It was an enormous pleasure, and we hope to see you soon. To everyone, okay? Have fun, enjoy, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.